So thank you, Yasmin, for this really nice talk. It's giving me a really nice introduction, in fact, for my old paper. First of all, I would like to say how happy I am to be back here after a few years, and to thank Isabelle Marteau for inviting me to talk about my past and present research in Coptic documentary paleography, and organizing, obviously, this amazing workshop. I would like also to thank the SFB 933, my current research team in Heidelberg University, and Rodney Hast, who allows me to speak today in Basel, Switzerland. This country and its linguistic situation is the perfect theater to introduce this topic with a really small excursus here. Wait, is it just turning?
It's almost the first time.
Okay.
It's difficult. Yeah.
So, gotta go, yes. In his 2016 book, Buntic talks about the Swiss multilingualism. All over the world, there are societies which use more than one language for communication. But for about 1.5 centuries, such situations were viewed as marginal exceptions to the axiom, one nation, one language, and cases like Switzerland were explained away as historical anomalies. In fact, late antique Egypt, as Switzerland, is multilingual by instance. And dealing with the 6th century documentation is talking about the product of Greek-Coptic contact and interaction for more than 2 centuries. This language situation has side effects, such as digraphism transpiring into paleography and scribal habits, as we will see during this talk. The Aphrodito Byzantine Archive from the 6th century AD is the richest papyrus archive we have from the Byzantine period in Egypt. It is also known as the so-called archive of Dioscorus of Aphrodito, because Dioscorus was one of the main characters and the writer of part of the text as a local official, notary, and poet. But the Aphrodito archive is belonging to his whole family and includes texts written by others, such as Apollos, his father, who stayed in his son's shade for more than a century. Gathering more than 700 texts of various content, it provides a unique opportunity to study day-to-day Greek and Coptic writings and literacy in the microcosm of an Egyptian village where bilingualism was a matter of fact. Thus, the corpus of Coptic letters in the Dioscorus archive, studied and edited in my dissertation, offers a unique body of material for the study of the 6th century Coptic digraphism and writing. On the one hand, because the corpus is homogeneous from the point of view of its origin, and on the other hand, because its dating is guaranteed by the Greek section of this archive. From prosopographical data contained in certain Greek texts complementary to Coptic text, it is sometimes possible to locate a text to the nearest decade or even year. This set of hands, dated with a certain precision, is therefore precious for the establishment of a recent paleography of the Coptic in the more general way, because currently no other documentary lot proposes such a sampling for this period, and the Coptic documentary hands have not yet been systematically studied. Aphrodito's Coptic text corpus contains a variety of graphic types, ranging from almost capital, let's say, bilinear writings, that is to say, mainly kept between 2 imaginary lines, even if some letters have small ascenders or descenders, to much more cursive hands, more quadrilinear. Different writing styles are at work, which can vary from the same text according to the language used, Greek or Coptic, and this variation between the 2 styles is sometimes voluntary. Comparison of documents put in series allows the creation of small dossiers. Hence, we have numerous texts, some dated with precision and involving identified scribes, which give us a large sample of identified hands. Thus, here we have the opportunity to compare Apollo's hand with other well-known hands dated with certainty during the first half of the 6th century and in the same village. So how to find a digraph scribe in the bilingual documentation where the documentary types and languages differ? Identification at the first sight is what you can read in some palaeographical descriptions, and although subjective, it is where it all starts. That feeling, as just Yasmin described before, which one can have when looking at some documents, and that is so hard to quantify. I had experienced the same feeling by chance, and this is probably the most subjective part of the word, as she described. And it gives you strength and excitement enough to go further through the amount of work that is to come. The first methodological problem is there. How can you identify a single writer in bilingual document when the Coptic writing is so different from the Greek? And how can we be sure that two persons are not involved and have penned different parts of the same document? Here is the first example where you could have a doubt. It is the signature of the writer of the letter in Coptic, the signature in Greek. Johannes, in here, is the tax receiver, and is very different from the Coptic style you can see on the picture. And moreover, is at the end of the letter, the last line. The second one is even trickier, because it names two persons in the first-person narratives. First, Anup bids farewell in the end of the Coptic letters. Then, Kyros is the author of the Greek greetings. But these similar patterns and letters, and even the same name, Phoibamon, in the two parts of the letters, confirm that these two styles are from the same writer and that he has these Greek and Coptic hand styles. The second methodological problem is how to distinguish between scribes with the similar styles or between different styles from the same hand. Here, this sample shows two different styles penned by the same person, Dioscorus himself, on the same sheet of papyrus. It is sometimes hard to distinguish between different scribes from the same period in the same village because they probably learn writing in the same school or with the same model, with the same general trends. Then we can start with secularly, surely identified hands and compare their general aspect and styles. In that perspective, we have a very good tool and an important starting point for the Byzantine period. This study by Dittart and Worp about the notaries' subscriptions. Thus, we have securely dated and identified hand on which we can rely on. Always keep in mind that two languages, of course, can imply two styles. That is to say, as far as Greek and Coptic are concerned, that the first is often more cursive than the second. We are here in the situation of functional biscriptality. That is to say that one can use Greek in Coptic text with a different function, such as writing administrative notations, date, amounts of money or totals, subscription or greetings. Analyzing segmentations, then, thanks to comparison in a table, is also quite convenient, because you can directly have a look at it and say yes or no and have reliable evidence. In here. This is the tool I am using because of my limited computer abilities. but I am sure that this archetype software we've seen this morning with Peter and Simona would probably give more empirical and better results. So if two languages are evolved, we need to focus on identical words, ligatures, or strings of letters. Undeclined Egyptian and troponyms are also good sample to use, for instance. Then you need to have a look here at the general context and date of this text. If it is a letter, who are the characters involved, who is the sender, and who is the addressee. Then you can enjoy the next feeling after the second one of having discovered something great and having proved perhaps a bit more objectively something that was totally subjective in the first place. So today I will discuss the way to unmask a digraph scribe and try to do him some justice. The case of Apollos, father of Dioscorus, will be in the end a good way to show how small hints could lead to larger results. I was highly inspired by Jennifer Cromwell's work and her concept of graphic bilingualism as a deliberate adoption of two writing styles to differentiate visually different parts of the documents. Another scholar, Giuseppina Azzarello's methodology, in her article A la ricerca della mano de Epagatos, was also a good parallel for the recognition of new hands attested in archives, even if she's dealing with more ancient material, here the Gemellus archive. James Keenan, in the first place, started to get into Apollo skills in an article published in '88 on languages and literacy in Byzantine Aphrodito. He thought that at that time, the evidence of Apollo's writing is slim. He adds that from the few bits that survive, it seemed to have had at least some problems. As far as can be judged, for passages are heavily restored, he wrote briefly and correctly for an illiterate. But his signature as village headman is one of the three described by Maspero as crossingly drawn and very bad spelled. We can see that these samples look different from the others, the name Apollos being the only common point between these three. It was the starting point of my reflection on that subject. Then, during the last 3 decades, scholars as Jean Gascou, Jean-Luc Fournet, and Constantin Zuckerman finally confirmed the identification of Apollos being the manager of Count Ammonius, owner of the large estate and patron of the village of Aphrodito. These are long accounts of several columns each, and the third one, the 140, is a list of Ammonios properties in the Aphrodito cadaster. 4 Coptic letters studied in my dissertation, the letter 7, 8, 9, and 10, all written by Apollos, give even more paleographic material. Thus, I have just studied an identified hand in these more extensive documents thanks to his abbreviation used in Coptic letters. You can see here that he's using the same patterns, ligatures, and even words in the 2 documentation. As we can see here on the screen, his Coptic style is largely bilinear, so just between 2 imaginary lines, while the Greek, as we have seen before, is clearly more quadrilinear. So the aspect between these 2 is strikingly different. Apollo's Greek and Coptic styles are close, but there are more irregularities and fewer ligatures in his Coptic style. However, the Greek style is influenced very much his Coptic style, and the differentiation between these two does not seem conscious for him. We can see here that his Coptic style is dependent from the Greek one, especially with regards to the formation of certain letters, such as eta, here surrounded by yellow circles, which has the quadrilateral form of the Greek eta rather than the Coptic small square eta as a capital H. His small Greek style epsilon in blue in here is very convenient also, so as not to confuse the standard Coptic epsilon surrounded by a red square and the phi here surrounded in green, whose layout is actually really very similar as well. However, if we move to letter formation, we can see that Apollos is not consistent and unconsciously changes from Greek to Coptic style. Here, for instance, he wrote the same word, teru, with the Coptic epsilon in the first line, and then in the second with the Greek epsilon. And they are just equally at the end of the line. His Greek style, attested in the same document on the verso, seems in there narrower, more fluid, and faster, and the letters have more regular appearance. As you can see in the red square, it switches to a Greek account recapitulation. With this level of integration between Coptic and Greek, it is clear that there is not a stop and passing the pen to somebody else. And when we have this size of dossier, where we can look at individual practices, we can be certain that this person was able to write both scripts. In fact, Apollos switches from one language to another and from the letter narrative style to administrative account style with pretty ease. At this stage, one could think that Apollos' digraphism may seem dictated by his few abilities. His Greek could be confined to the book of accounts, whose entries are made up of raw informations listed one after the other with no or very few syntax, and of formulary subscription, whereas the Coptic is used in long letters with a narrative content and instructions. Being a Coptic native speaker, his language is close to the standard Coptic, and his hand, although constrained, remains clear and very legible. Comparing to the others, Apollos has an upright, small cursive writing with some bilinear patterns. In that perspective, he is highly recognizable from the village notaries and writings from the first half of the 6th century, such as Abraham, Kyros, and a bit later, Hermaos. We have here some general aspect of their sloping, right-leaning handwritings. Some details show that the three others have common features with Apollos, because they probably just use the same models. Some details also shows that the three others have big differences with Apollos. Most of the time because Apollos' writing is upright, more bilinear, and letters are less ligatured one to the others. The problem is getting harder to solve when we have a look at the fiscal receiver, Johannes, and writing, since he's the writer of the dossier of account. Certainly due to the type of documents involved and to the same scribal practice, we still can see some close features in Apollos and Johannes' hands. The whole fiscal documentation from Aphrodito, including the cadaster, the second hand of the fiscal register, lists of taxpayers and of corporation, need to be identified more and examined more deeply. Apollos' hedge could be another obstacle to other paths. Having a long career of about 30 years, he probably wrote at different ways at different stages of his career and according to the type of documents involved. So I've tried to attribute to Apollos new text according to paleographical identification. First, these payment orders. Back to Kinnan's quotation, we can see that the payment order 52 addressed to Johannes, the fiscal register just mentioned before, Apollos is the last one signing. It's in just the last line. He signed there in a very short way, Apollos Toike, and his upright style, attested in Ammonius accounts, can be recognized. In 53, on the verso, there is an analog payment order from the same year to the same person, Johannes. Apollos' signature is there different. It's not really legible because of the sun. He is now using this sloping Greek style to distinguish its subscription from the rest of the text, since he is the first one to sign before his colleague village Botos, his village headman Botos, who have also signed the first order of payment. None has realized, even Maspero, who already proposed to read Sesemeiomai in the 53, I have signed, that it was Apollos' second style adopted on purpose. He is using a sloping style to distinguish this part from the body of the document, as a deliberate choice of graphic bilingualism. The confirmation is given by the rest of these two payments order. Going further into the paleographical analysis, thanks to common pattern and ligature collected in this table, makes you realize that Apollos was in fact the writer of the whole 53 and probably of the whole 52. Here you can even have the same name, Victory or Victor, son of Tacumias, written in the same way. Then I've just turned to a loan of money from the Michigan collection. Here is the whole document, and Apollo's signature is kept at the bottom of this loan. It was considered as the fourth hand in the edition, and one of the samples of identification mentioned above is not quoted in Kinnan's article. Before his are the signature from the two other contractants, Victor, son of Bessarion, and Senutes, son of Apollos. That is to say, Apollos' nephew and son. He signed there in a very right-leaning style too. Again, going further into the paleographical analysis makes you realize that Apollos was the scribe of the body of the document as well. Although the conditions of the papyrus is fragmentary and the quantity of paleographic material at my disposal in this text is limited, I propose that Apollos is the scribe of this contract, thus attributing to him M1 and M4, thanks to this comparison. We could then shift to the documentary type of acknowledgement of depth, because he signed the whole text. The last document, which be here presented, is this letter from Yasmin's corpus. As far as I know, no letter in Greek attributed with certainty to Apollos was known until now, which limited his epistolary activity to Coptic language. It was a possible but surprising fact. The writing of this Greek letter, in fact, recently just drew my attention. The address on the verso is lost, thus there is no way to know who the sender was. It is a ligature cursive writing with a narrow model. It is quite fluid and upright, and like most of the sloping writings Yasmin studied. The abundance of paleographical material provided by our few 4 long letters in Coptic and by the other Greek documents by his hand allow a possible identification, which is still on. First, I have the same impression of regularity of letters just going above and below the line. The angle of writing is identical, and even the space between the characters. On closer inspection, one notes the scribe lack of regularity in the refill of his calamus. There is a refill of ink every 6 to 18 letters at the beginning and the middle of the words. Perhaps by chance, this scribe, however, reloads his calamus at the exact same place between eta and kappa in the numbers beginning of the suffix ekonta, in the Coptic letter and in these Greek letters. In fact, he refills his calamus as late as possible, which makes the last letters written before refilling looking very dim. To this initial impression of proximity between the Greek and Coptic letters, one needs now some objective identification. The following tables provide the details of ligatures that confirm these impressions. Apollos lacked of conscious distinction in the use of these different styles that makes it possible to find similarities in the document in this hand. The following tables therefore compare the same samples provided by all the texts mentioned in this talk: Apollo's subscription, Coptic letters, accounts from the Count Ammonios estate, payment of order, loan contract, and finally the Greek letter. The few differences between these are due to the function of the text and this readership, according to me. One would expect more application in the writing of the contract and letters read by respective addresses, such as a high-ranking official in the case of the Greek letter. However, the doctus and the ligature patterns remain the same. If my identification is correct, it could therefore be the first identified letter written in Greek by Apollos. The paleographical study of this letter, perhaps from his hand, could make it possible to question his status. He is the center of at least 4 Coptic letters, and perhaps this one in Greek, if we follow my identification. He seems really at ease in both languages. This study was also an opportunity to show that, in addition, Apollos was also the writer of a loan contract and of at least 1 or 2 payment orders. So we can see that his handwritings during about 20 years, from 527 to his death in probably 546. Apollos was indeed capable and even accustomed to writing Greek in all types of documents, thanks to his daily practice of his activities as a village headman, but also as an administrator of large estate. Thus, against the opinion of Maspero and after him of Canaan, we affirmed that Apollos was not an illiterate, but that he was fully able to write lots of documents and that he was experienced scribe. This list is preliminary and not exhaustive, since it is still a work in progress. But there is still a lot to do, in particular on the identification of Johannes and writings and his difference and common patterns with Apollos. A systematic survey of the Aphrodito's archive would probably show more examples, more samples of Apollos writing, and some computer science colleague in this room would probably make it quicker and easier. I already have in mind at least 5 documents which could be good candidates. I thank you for your attention, and I would be really happy to answer the questions.